When you watch a professional dancer move across the stage, there's something almost magnetic about the way their body cuts through space. Long, clear, effortless. Most of us want that, but few of us have ever been taught what we're actually looking at. This episode is part of our ongoing series with Chelsea Weidmann, also known as the Geeky Ballerina, where we unpack specific elements of artistry as she identified and explored them in her thesis on artistry in ballet. Today, we're diving into one of the most foundational and misunderstood elements of all, line. Chelsea breaks down exactly what line is and what it isn't, the different categories of line, and how understanding your body's planes of action can immediately inform and improve your technique. We also talk about transitions and how to shape the lines between your movements, what actually goes into creating the illusion of length that professionals seem to achieve so effortlessly, and how to start training your lines no matter what level you're at right now. If you've ever watched yourself in the mirror and known something was off but just couldn't name it, this episode will give you the tools to find your best lines and enhance your artistry. Let's get into it. Hello, Chelsea. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be back.
We are going to be talking about line today, and I'm really excited for this one. This is actually one of the ones I think I'm the most excited to get into, just because there has been a lot of misunderstanding around this concept. And so maybe we could just jump right in with talking about defining what line is as an element of artistry, and then also talking about what it is not, since we both think that's
Yes.
important.
Okay, so I'm going to take that question in reverse order, and we're going to talk about what line is not.
Perfect.
Because this one gets misunderstood. Line in general gets misunderstood more often than I think it's understood. But line is not outline. And that is not clearly understood. When I talk to adult dancers who are coming back or who are brand new beginners, the number of adults that I know who went to take a ballet class when they were 4 and were told by either their mother or their teacher that they were too fat, and that was it. It breaks my heart, right? And any of your listeners who are nodding along with this, like, if you're listening in the car, pull over and give yourself a minute. Like, you're not alone, and it's tragic. Bodies exist in 3 dimensions, and the idea that we can't allow people to have a canister-shaped torso, which is what the rib cage does, like, every body is capable of achieving line. And none of us can create the idealized body. I think in my somatic awareness chapter that we talked about last time, we talked about how you need to get to know your body instead of like the idealized body, and line is similar. What we've done in our heads is we've taken like this person's feet and this person's shoulders and this person's spine and this person's thighs, and we've melded it together and been like, this is what a ballet body looks like. That's not what anybody's body looks like. And so we're not talking about your outline. You can be literally any size, any weight, any voluptuous curves, any straight lines, like whatever they are. Ballet is still for you if you want to be there. And I kind of think that might be my life's work, honestly, is to just hold the door open for people. So line has nothing to do with the outline of your body. It's not the shape that you make when you flop backwards to be a snow angel. Everyone can do this.
Yeah, I love that. And I, like you, am very passionate about this just because so many of the adult dancers that I talk to and learn about their history with dance, it's just this recurring thing that you hear, that they were told at some point in their journey that they could not achieve quote unquote line, or, they couldn't achieve the correct shape. And it's really heartbreaking, like, to think of how many people have been cut off from their love of ballet by this completely false, very narrow-minded idea. I think it's like a very lazy idea
Yes.
at the end of the day, because it's teachers and institutions that are not willing to put in the work to better defining terms, and so it becomes this like lazy way of it's so lazy. And I think I love what you said, actually, because I had never thought about this, and the word that was like popping into my head was Frankenstein. I'm like, it's so true. We have like Frankenstein, this ballerina idea that no one is, but it's so funny because I think we all have that idea that you were talking about. I'm like, where did we get this Frankenstein ballerina idea of like, this is perfect feet, this is perfect legs, this is perfect, neck,
Yes.
all of the things, and we put together this concept in our head that no one actually truly achieves. Even the best dancers, I'm sure if you asked them, they could name off multiple things that, they don't have. I love how Skylar Brandt has been so open on social media about the fact that she wears the farches, the fake arch
Yeah.
enhancers for her feet, because I'm like, you look at someone like Skylar Brandt, who's a principal dancer at one of the best companies in the world, and doesn't have, quote unquote, perfect ballerina feet. And so it's just such an interesting idea to examine because I think it's one that we've all kind of passively accepted and put on ourselves and are then trying to achieve. And it's like when you really break it down and think about it, it's a really strange thing that we've done.
It really is. And I read an article in The Guardian yesterday, so I don't know what your turnover time is, but today is March 21st, so it probably came out like on the 20th, and it talked about the concept of like these fake arches and how many dancers of color have been invited to leave ballet just because genetically African American dancers or dancers of African descent, I don't want to be like geographically limiting, you have a wide audience, but they tend to have a higher incidence of flat feet, but we still have so many beautiful dancers of African descent, like ballet dancers in their pointe shoes. And so this idea of banana feet, we'll just look at the line from the big toe to the ankle. The idea of the banana foot actually doesn't serve the dance. It serves the social media picture, but it doesn't serve anybody's artistry or performance or even safety.
Yeah, it's the same. I'm thinking of like hyper extension or hypermobility, specifically in the legs and the knees. It's become this very idealized line, but it's actually tends to be very unstable, very difficult to work with, and can lead to higher rates of injury. So it is interesting how even with that Frankenstein ballerina idea, we've even adopted things that aren't even necessarily beneficial or serve the dancing, like you said. So it's this very weird thing.
It sounds like we're breeding a dog, and then you look at the bulldog and go, oh, it can't breathe. What have we done? Like, we might need to we definitely need to back off. No more perfect ballerinas.
That's so
Just
funny.
human
Oh my
ballerinas.
gosh, I love that idea. I'm just gonna we just need to meme that the Frankenstein ballerina is like the equivalent of the Frenchie of the dog world.
Okay, if you can find a photo of a Frenchie in a tutu, put that instead of my face on that thing. It will be so perfect.
It's like the perfect metaphor. It's like it's adorable. It can't breathe, but it's adorable.
Can't breathe. There's like snot and spit falling off of it, but it's so cute.
Yeah, tons of medical issues, but it's so cute to look at. I know it is.
Yeah, that's exactly what this idealized ballet body is. It has so many issues. It does more psychological damage even.
Yeah.
Right? Like I just keep coming back to all of the adults I've met who believe that this beautiful thing they would love to learn is not for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So important to start with. I'm really glad that we started there. So maybe now we could talk about what it is. Now that we have released the baggage,
Okay.
let's talk about what it is in the healthy
Yes.
way, in the way that
Yes.
serves all of us.
Okay, so I spent a lot of time looking into what line is because it gets used as like a coded term a lot. And what I have found is that it is shorthand for three different things, and you never really know which it is. So it can be the straight and static lines. So those are your positions: first position, fifth position, fourth position. Is your attitude turned out? Where's your retiré? Are you holding your port de bras correctly? Those are your snapshots. It can be your curved and dynamic lines. That's when we get into the pathway of the port de bras or the rond de jambe movement itself, or the connecting steps like glissade have a lot of curves in them. And then also it can also mean the illusion of line, which is the one where I think we think the Frankenstein ballerina is possible because we see real human bodies that are still a very narrow subset, but they are actual people on stage and their body is doing this amazing thing and it is taking up space and suggesting things that aren't quite there but are there. And so like our brains just fill things in. It's almost like a Gestalt principle. But anyway, those are the three: the straight and static, the curved and dynamic, and then the illusion of lying. And we can talk about whichever one you think is most interesting, or all three.
Yeah, I would love to dive into all three. So maybe we'll start with static and straight because that's how you approach it in your book. So can you give a brief overview of that concept? And then I'd love to dive into how understanding ourselves and our movement in this way can help, but maybe we can start with like just deeper dive into what the concept is.
So as I mentioned, it's the positions of the feet and the arms mostly, and it's the snapshots that you'll make, like the really great photos. So that's where we would start. And then I'm thinking back to when I work with students, the first thing I focus on is their core strength. Because if we have the core strength, then we can get the pelvis in the most neutral position possible for that skeleton. Most bodies can get level or very close to level. And what that does a couple of things. I think we've talked before about how it keeps the hip joint nice and open so you can access your full range of motion. And then also I learned this last week, because I love to research things, that is it's easier to engage your transverse abdominis, which is one of your deepest core stabilizers, when you're in that neutral position. So we work on getting the core stability and the alignment so that we can more easily find those static lines and also sustain them for those balances. And then the next evolution of that is finding your aplomb. It comes from the same root word as the plumb line. It's this idea that you have like this line that just like naturally settles straight. So you want to think about, like, if you were a merry-go-round horse, like where is the pole going through your body? And you want it to center over your base of support. And your base of support is what you're standing on. So it is both the width of your feet and the length of your feet, and then how they orient. When you're in parallel, your base of support feels wider front to back than when you're in turnout, because your feet are longer than they are wide. And so that's why it's harder to keep your balance in your turnout, even if you're not forcing it. But it's that sense of aplomb. So if you're in first position, your center line is going to land between your heels. But when you come into fifth position, you still need it to land over the center of your base of support laterally, which is going to be halfway between your foot. I really should just get like a human skeleton for these conversations. But like, if this is your heel and this is your longest toe, it should be laterally in the middle, but also front to back. So if you have a really open fifth, it's going to be in that empty space. And a lot of us have open fifths. Most of us don't have flat fifths. And this is where, when that's not understood, people tend to put their weight solely on their back foot. And then we can like push into our knees and things like that.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I love that concept of the plumb line that you talk about in your book. And you talk about planes of action too, which I thought was a really interesting concept. And I'd love if you could talk about like how understanding our planes can help adult dancers with technique, because you talked about some really interesting things like with rondejam and overcrossing and alignment, that understanding these planes of action really helped me conceptualize. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Ah, so the first plane that we'll talk about is the frontal plane, and that's the front of your body. So if you were like a gingerbread cookie and you're laying flat on the table, everything you can see is your frontal plane. And frontal plane comes in really handy when you're trying to figure out where your olisocone is. If you look down the side of someone, your olisocone, even if you had flat turnout, is not going to go behind your ear, because it's not going to be in your shoulder blade territory.
Yeah.
So, and when we work with beginners of any age, the side to side movements are the ones that I do most often. So I will do my gallops and my chasses and my pas de chas. I will do as many things décolleté as possible to get really familiar with the frontal plane. And then I'll add in the sagittal plane, which is if we split you in half and then you go forwards. The trick with the sagittal plane is you are moving forwards and backwards. The frontal plane does not move forward. I love that Latin has worked out this way to our benefit. But the sagittal plane is where you find out where is your devant and where is your derriere. And it really is, if we had cut you in the center, that's where you want to get your ankle bone to. So your tendu devant is ankle bone in line with your navel and your nose. And then to the back, your derriere is still ankle bone, but instead of the inside ankle bone, it'll be the outside ankle bone, still in line with your spine, your navel, your nose, depending on how good you are at doing your hair, your bun. But that's how you know, okay, this is where I go. And it when we make it into this grid, it simplifies things both for people who are hyperextended and for people who have less extension than average. But your sagittal line, where your devant is and where your derriere is the same. It doesn't matter how mobile that knee joint is or how big your calf muscle is. Those are the two things that throw people off the most. Those of us that are blessed with really big calf muscles, our legs look sometimes like they're overcrossing when they're not. Or, for example, those of us with human feet instead of banana feet. The goal that I tell my students is we bring our ankle bone to that midline, to that sagittal plane, and then we work on building the intrinsic muscles of our feet to bring the toes to the ankle. But it's not about toes only, because if it's only about the toes and we haven't trained the feet, and that takes years. I was in college before I got my first compliment on my feet.
Yeah.
Years, right? If we only work on the toes, then we've overcrossed in the ankle, which is going to make it really hard to keep our hips stable in our rondejam. It's setting us up for much more difficult fouettes, right? You can be good at fouettes before your feet catch up to you. So that's why the sagittal plane is so important. And then the frontal and the sagittal play together a lot in our connecting steps, because we are moving through the space, usually on one of them, and then our limbs are on another one. So rondejam goes into the sagittal plane, and then we have to maintain the turnout in that weird no man's land until we get to the frontal plane, and then we have to maintain that turnout in that weird no man's land until we get to the sagittal plane in the back, and then we bring it through first. I am a big believer that rondejam should go through your personal first so that we can recenter our plumb. It's a really complicated movement.
Yeah.
I love it though.
Yeah, I do too. It's one of my favorite steps in ballet. But I loved this idea of the planes specifically for rondejam, and especially things to the back, because I think so often we have the tendency to not cross enough, and so I think
Yep.
when you conceptualize it as yourself divided in half and reaching for that mid line when you're going back, a lot of times that can help bring you into better alignment if you're someone who tends to not cross enough reaching to the back. I think envisioning that line was really helpful for me.
I'm glad.
Going back to plumb line, because I think this concept is really great for stability too. So how do we understand plumb line to help us stabilize in the context of line? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I need to jump back for 2 seconds because there are 3 planes of movement, and in case you have somebody who's like, where's the third?
Oh,
We got to help these people. The third is the transverse plane, and it can be at any height, but it's rotational movement. So I can have a transverse plane. Oh, my collar is so helpful. So I can have a transverse plane here, and I can rotate here. I can do the same thing at my waist. The floor can be a transverse plane, and I can rotate in a pirouette. That's what the third one is. Just for those that were like, hang on.
yeah.
Demon.
Thank you for that. I got excited.
So plumb line, there's so many different things we could talk about. I think one of the most important things to understand is that your base of support in ballet is almost always changing. So if you're standing flat, it's this long, and we're just going to pretend that the width doesn't matter right now. And then you go to your demi point, and you've lost 2/3 of your base of support. And then you go to your full point if you're doing point work, and you're on like an inch. Right. And so your base of support is constantly moving. We're rolling up, we're rolling down, we're traveling directionally through space. It's always moving and it's always changing. And one of the things I think helps people bring awareness to where that base of support is relaxing their baby toes or imagining your baby toes as little weights pressing into the ground. It helps to activate a lot of muscles actually that are stabilizers. And then also it helps you realize like, how much of this foot am I actually standing on?
I think the whole idea of plumb line is so helpful for even just understanding like the physics of how our bodies stabilize, because like I'm thinking of, because I have a little bit of hyperextension in my legs, I have to be a little bit more over my leg if I'm on one leg, like doing a balance on one leg. I have to be a little bit more over in order to find my plumb line, because to have the weight disbursement on
Yeah.
either side, I have to push over a little bit more. And so I think it's such a great concept for understanding like the physics of what's happening in your body when you're trying to find stability. For me, this is a really helpful image of how do I don't want to say compensate, because I don't mean you do like weird things, but sometimes you do have to compensate for your proportions, for like of hypermobility. And I think the plumb line provides a really great way of conceptualizing why that is and what's happening in order to achieve that.
Yeah. One of the images that I like is the zoo near my house has a carousel and it's all different animals. And they all have that carousel through their plumb line, but the amount of body on any given side is different. Like the horse looks really different from the otter, which looks really different from the giraffe. And that's what we do in dance, right? Like your plumb line in your attitude devant is it adjusts from your fifth position into your attitude because more of your body weight is now in front of you. And the hyperextended knees, like you're not compensating, you are finding the plumb line for your body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it really helps. Kind of even going back to what we talked about at the beginning about how everyone is different and there is room for all different shapes and sizes in ballet. And I think this idea of plumb line is important and valuable because it accommodates any shape and size, because it is so unique to you. Like you
Yeah.
finding your plumb line is going to be something that is totally individual, and we can all figure out how to make it work for our body. So I love that. Thank you to Orza for sponsoring today's episode. Ballet asks a lot of our bodies, and our feet are often the first place we feel it. Especially as adult dancers, balancing our training with busy lives, old injuries, long days, and limited recovery time, taking care of ourselves really matters. And that's why I love Orza ballet slippers. Orza was created by professional dancer Seth Orza, who experienced firsthand the need for better, smarter slippers. After developing severe plantar fasciitis, he created the first ever patented shock-absorbing ballet shoes designed to support your body with modern footwear technology while still maintaining the traditional ballet aesthetic. Because they're designed to help reduce fatigue, improve stamina, and prevent injuries, you can focus more on your dancing and less on pain management. I started wearing the Orza Pro 2.0 earlier this year and have never looked back. The shock absorption has virtually eliminated chronic pain in my right foot, and they've made such a difference in how I feel both during and after class. If you're an adult dancer like me, you know how important it is to take care of your body so you can keep doing what you love. Visit orzabrand.com and use code AFTERCLASS5 for $5 off your new favorite ballet slippers. Links included in the show notes. So maybe now we could talk about curved moving category for lines. I love in the book, I love port de bras. I'm such just like a port de bras lover. And so I loved this concept in understanding port de bras. So could we talk about that and about curved moving lines and how they can help us understand our arms and think about our arms?
Ballet arms are so interesting because they're round, but part of the reason they're round is because if we straighten them all the way, they look lumpy. And the arms don't pass the midline. Even when you think they do, it's because the eye line has gone, but the arms almost never cross the midline. Almost never. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and say that even if you think they do, check again because we've probably moved at the waist and they still probably haven't crossed like the sternum. The amount of flexion in the shoulder joint is not super great, which is part of how we're able to keep that openness through the chest, which is another one of those ballet lines that we look for is like, oh, so open through the sternum. And part of the way we maintain that is that the curved arm doesn't, the longest finger is not going to cross the center of your nose.
Yeah, which I think that's a really helpful, again, because for me, I like to visualize things in this way. And I think if you're someone who, when you see yourself in the mirror, or specifically, I think if you watch a video of yourself dancing and you're wondering why things maybe don't look quite right, I know for me, that's a lot of times a big one is because I am crossing my midline. I'm bringing my arms, in too much. I'm kind of collapsing inward a little bit more, and I'm not keeping that roundness and that curvature and keeping my arms away from my midline. So I think that that's probably a common one because I think sometimes, we watch ourselves and we're like, it doesn't look quite the way that I know it should. And for me, that's a big one.
Yeah.
You also talk in this section of the book about transitions and how keeping your arm and leg coordination is such a big part of like making those seamless transitions. Can you talk about that more? Because I actually think we may have talked about this in a previous episode, but just how transitions are one of those things that I think take you from looking more of like a beginner dancer to a more intermediate advanced dancer is the seamlessness of your transitions. And I think it's such a big part of tapping into those higher levels of artistry, and really feeling like we're able to emote and convey emotion the way that we want to is the transitions and those moments between the steps. And so I would love to dive into this a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, I always say that transitions are where the magic happens.
Mhm.
This is where the curved lines starts to bleed into the illusion of line almost because most of those transition steps, I'm going to come back to glissade because it is just used so often. What helps me is if I think about myself as like a stick dancer, like I'm in the air and then I land on the ground and then my energy is going to curve below it in the glissade to come back up. Like if this is the floor, I'm playing above and below it with where my line and my energy is going. And that kind of starts things in ballet kind of loop together like cursive writing.
Mhm.
Like when you're coming from a pirouette, if you're going to land it in fifth position, I always tell my students to get dirty tights and drag it down their leg because it places it into the fifth position really carefully instead of like stepping forward and then scooching a foot somewhere. It ends up looking more curved,
Yeah.
which is just,
I think it has like a seamlessness to it. I love what you said about conceptualizing it as writing in cursive because I think there's something really beautiful in that way of thinking about your dancing is that it shouldn't feel chopped, the
right.
if we write in print, it's like we do a letter, we have to lift the pen, we do a letter, we have to lift the pen, and I think that that's when you're a beginner, inevitably that's how it's going to feel. But I think
Yeah.
as you progress, we're all striving for that feeling of writing in cursive where each letter is connected seamlessly to the one before it. So in this specific topic or on this topic, are there tips that you have for adult dancers, ways that they can approach training their transitions to support artistry? So like are there things that you really recommend that are like this is a really great way to train your line within your transitions?
Yeah, this gets really layered. This is super fun. The first one is knowing where your sagittal line is. Where is your devant? Where is your derriere? And being able to take it with you anywhere in the room, croisé, en face, effacé, standing in the janitor's closet because you got lost in a manège, like whatever it happens to be. I went Spanish Black Swan. Instead of downstage right, I was upstage left, facing the back of the studio. I was like, I am so glad this is a rehearsal.
I freaking hate a manege. I'm like, can we not ever like I'm like, we're already turning. Do we have to then be turning in a circle? Like it just I don't know if it's age or what, but it screws with my balance and my just dizziness so bad. I'm like, toss it out. I don't ever want to do it again.
It's well, who was like, hey, let's move in two transverse planes at the same time. Yes, you need to know where your sagittal line is, so you know where your devant and your derriere are. One of the other things you can work on is working on getting like your fingertips and your toe tips to the position at the same time. It was a game changer for me when one of my teacher mentors was like, you should never have the arm go in grand battement on count 8, because for your grand jeté, you want it together. So toes and fingers arriving at the same time can be really, really helpful. Also, on the flip side of that, if you can keep the arms a little bit longer after you land, it gives the illusion of line that you've been in the air longer. So we want to get the fingers and the toes there, wherever there may be, at the same time. And then leave the fingers a little bit longer on the landing. Makes a really big difference in the jumps.
Are there exercises that you recommend for training this curved line placement? Because I think that's even just recently, I've been looking at videos, and like the thing that I am continually dissatisfied with is those moments of transition and what the arms are doing and why they don't look as seamless into the next step. So I'm curious if you have any exercises that you give for this.
Yeah. I really like to have dancers, and I forget who I learned this with. I wish I could give credit because I didn't come up with it. But you'll lay on your back. It doesn't matter if you prefer to bend your knees or not. Everybody has a different preference. And you'll bring your arms to your first position, and you'll notice how your shoulder blades are making contact with the floor. And then you slowly move up to your fifth high and through your second and down to your fifth low and through your first. And the goal is to keep the exact same amount of your shoulder blades on the ground the entire time. So I'll do 8 that direction, and then I'll reverse it, fifth low to second to fifth high to first, and do 8 that direction. And it does a few interesting things. It really helps to train the idea that we're not moving the shoulder itself. We're moving the arm separate from the shoulder joint. It helps to train the muscle memory. It helps to bring the awareness to it. It's just a really good strength builder for some people.
That's very, very, very helpful. The last thing I would love to dive into, which I know you mentioned in the book, it's like one of the hardest ones to define and kind of wrap our minds around. But I think it's the one that you mentioned earlier. It's like the thing that we all think of when we think of the professional dancer on stage, and how are they making themselves look so long. And it's always funny to me too, because a lot of times when you actually find out how tall some of these dancers are in real life, they're like 5'2", and they just look so long on stage. And you're like, how are they doing that? So illusion of line. I would love to talk about this. So if we could talk about what goes into creating that illusion of length, and maybe the cues that can help us start achieving it.
I think the most valuable thing is to feel beautiful. And this is one of the areas where adults have a leg up, because you have more autonomy over what you wear. If you feel beautiful in class, you are more willing to take up space. And that illusion of line requires you to take up that space. It's so interesting, because you need to have the technique. And then you need to trust that you have the technique. And then you need to enjoy that you're using the technique. And yet at the same time, the illusion of line is not solely technical. It's so difficult, which is why we love it so much. But like the fingers and the toes arriving together tends to take the audience's eye, like just boom, right there. And the faster we can get the audience's eye to that point, the longer they think you spent there. There's a lot of almost optical illusions. Like in arabesque, if you're looking over your fingers, your arabesque is going to look longer than if you look in the mirror. It automatically shortens it. And the only way to know what you look like is to look in the mirror. And it's just so unfair. Your eye line has a lot to do with the illusion of line. Making sure that you haven't, if we overcross the midline with our arms, we shorten the line, everything looks compressed. Your breath helps a lot. If you're holding your breath, your audience, no matter how far away they are, can sense it. There's this great thing called relational orienting that we all do, and we just are so much more aware of the humans around us than we realize. So if you're holding your breath, you cannot express, like you can't express because that is expansive by nature.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of things. And then I think the thing that is the hardest, and I will probably spend the rest of my life working on, is believing that what you are doing at the level you are at today is a gift to someone. That your performance, whether you're on stage or in class, you are showing up as a human and you are allowing yourself to be seen. And I can't give credit for where I heard this. I need to take more notes in my life. But someone said that when you allow yourself to be seen, the person looking at you, you're giving them permission to be seen as well, which is part of why ballet, even when it's not on stage, is so powerful because you're in a room, especially with adults. I love adult dancers because we all come together and we're saying, I will let you see me and I will see you. And it creates almost this sublime experience.
Totally.
And I think that's what we see on stage is someone who has mastered their body to the best that humans are able and has mastered the ballet technique to the best that humans are able, and then comes on stage and says, flawed and beautiful. And I'm going to take up all the space. I'm going to leave. I had a teacher who would always say, leave it all on the floor. Don't save any of it for after class. You don't need it then. None of those are actionable tips. They're just,
I actually think that that's really helpful because I think in my amateur assessment,
I don't think you're as amateur as you think. You're getting really up there, by the way. I've seen pictures.
Thank you.
So happy for you.
Thank you. But I think that you cannot separate the mind-body connection just in general in life. But I think in ballet, like I think it's so great that you touched on that because I don't think it is something that you can achieve without the mental component. There has to be this permission that we give ourselves and a commitment to do it and to go for it, and that starts in the mind before you can have it come out in your in your body. And so that the feeling of like the length and the reaching, I think you really can't separate it from a mental place that you have to either just be lucky enough to exist in, or if you're like the rest of us, you have to be able to choose to go there in spite of all your insecurities. You have to be like, okay, I'm gonna push. And I think that that's what a lot of times, again, going back to like, I know when I watch videos of myself or, in class, I'm seeing myself in the mirror and I'm like, oh, it's just not what I want it to be. It's because I haven't mentally freed myself up enough to really reach and lengthen and go for it in the way that does give that illusion of more length and being bigger, that we all want because it's what we see on stage and we're like, I want that. But yeah, I think the way you have to get there is hugely mental.
Yeah. And I have had, I think, one perfect performance in my life where I was like, oh my gosh, I've never watched a video of it. And I never will. I am not taking that from myself.
Yeah.
So if you have that moment where you're like, yes, that was good, don't look for validation. Trust yourself. And that goes a long way when you can trust yourself. But even for the people, I'm thinking back to the people who were body shamed as 4-year-olds, and I just want to give them hugs. But it is really scary to step into a ballet studio and then to think, I can't. Like, how am I going to take up space here? So if you're not ready to take up space in an expansive way, let's bring it back to the straight and static lines. Let's take up more space vertically. You can get a little taller, or you can ground deeper into the ground. Let the ground support you. Tell that expensive marley floor that it will support you today because you are here to dance.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we start.
Yeah.
And then we grow from there.
I love too that you mentioned part of it being with adults, like this gift of getting to choose what you wear in the classroom, because I This is a hill that is so funny because anyone who knows me in real life will laugh because this is like something I'm known for at my home studio, especially is like I love pretty dancewear. And I think it's because it there is something real to it beyond just like, oh, I like fun girly things. It's like I think that there is something about choosing to care for yourself in that way of like I'm going to go into class giving myself the benefit of feeling as good as I possibly can. And for me, that's like a cute floral leotard and a skirt. For someone else, it might be something totally different. But I think it's like I want to give every adult who comes to ballet the permission to get something for yourself, buy something for yourself to wear that makes you feel great because I think that that can be such a hurdle when you're doing something that is so much in the mirror.
Yep.
If you are looking in the mirror and you don't feel comfortable in what you're wearing or you don't feel your best, pushing for something like what we're talking about with line and something that I think does, like we've discussed, it takes an inner confidence to get there. And what you're wearing can really be so helpful. I'm like, do not underestimate the power of what you wear to the studio. I really do think it is such a big factor and giving yourself the gift of like what does that look like for me? And if you have the means to like spend a little bit of money on buying yourself the leotard that's going to make you feel your best in class, I think is really important. And it can be kind of written off as frivolous, but I'm like, I think it's really important.
There's actually science that backs you up. You are correct.
Thank you.
Like I forgot what the branch of psychology is, but it has been proven that when you dress the part, you act the part.
Yeah.
Right. And so dress in the way that you feel the best. It makes the biggest difference.
Yeah, it really does. So I know we've talked a lot about how this is like, oh, it's a lot of it is mindset, which is totally true. But all that being said, are there any cues that you use with your students to help them tap into this illusion of line?
One of the differences is you can place a position or you can reach through it, like reaching past the position, as long as you're staying in alignment with your sagittal plane and your frontal plane. We don't want to place it so much as we want to, like, in arabesque, it's going to go through it. It's going to reach beyond it.
So there's like an energy coming.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way of conceptualizing, what a teacher's either asking you for, or if you're just trying to recreate what you're seeing, how can I get that length when I see a professional or when I see a picture on social media of a dancer and they feel so long and like why can't I get that? I think that idea of are you thinking of your position as a more placed position or are you thinking of the position as you're reaching and there's energy coming out from your fingers? I think there's like an immediate little subtle shift that happens. And it's so subtle, but it's wild how big of a difference it makes, even though it is so subtle.
Yeah. Another thing to think of is think of your body as a 5-pointed star, right? So your arms and your legs are 4, and then your spine is the 5th. And whatever you're doing, we need equal energy through all 5 rays of the star.
Mm-hmm. So to cap things off, I would love to know how we can start training our lines according to our level, because I know I have listeners that maybe have just started ballet, some that are more intermediate, some that are more advanced. So if we're wanting to really work on developing this element of artistry in our own dancing, what are some things that we could focus on according to level?
It actually progresses the way we've talked about it today. So for our beginning dancers, we will work mostly on the straight and static lines. And then when you become more intermediate, then the focus shifts more to the curved and the dynamic. And then the advanced dancers focus primarily on the illusion of line. But I don't want anyone who's a beginner thinking, oh, I'll never be good enough to work on the illusion of line, because especially as adults, we don't progress in a super chunked out, obvious way. So if you've been taking ballet for 7 months, you understand a plie well enough that you can start bringing in something like a curved line or an illusion of line. Or if you are a natural turner, if you're natural at adagio, if it's your second ballet class ever and you're like, I am really good at this, go straight to illusion of line. Anything you feel like you're good at, right? So it's, in the one way, it goes with levels. But because adults are more self-aware and are able to self-correct with less, like with the little ones, I teach them how to self-correct. Adults tend to be better at it. Yeah. I would, in case you need permission, here is your permission. You can be like, you know what? I am a beginner in a pirouette. I'm going to work on the placement of my retiré, but I'm really good at waltz turns. I'm going to work on my illusion of line. And I'm pretty good at chaînés. I'm going to work on the curved line around the aplomb. You can mix and match.
Yeah, that's really helpful, though, I think, for even just the way that you described it for adults, because I think that's very validating for me, and I'm sure for others who are listening, that adults do tend to not progress in a linear, perfect straight line. Like there's things that we might naturally take to faster, and then there's other things that are going to develop a little bit slower, and we don't always fit in these really clean categories of beginner, intermediate, advanced. So it was a trick question and you passed.
Yes. So excited.
So how can people stay connected to you and find you and follow your work?
The best place to find me is on my website, geekyballerina.com. I have a newsletter that goes out twice a month. In fact, March was about line, actually.
It was. I got that.
Turned out so well.
A few days, was it last week? A few days ago? I don't know. The concept of site is very elusive right now. But.
I know, right? I also have a blog on there that I update. I am slightly active on Facebook and Instagram, not super. A little bit more active on TikTok. TikTok is where I do a lot of teaching tips. But it's all Geeky Ballerina everywhere.
Okay. I'll put all of the links to your website, your book, all the things. So anyone who doesn't know, I think I mentioned this at the beginning, but I'll say it again. I'm basing a lot of the questions I'm asking Chelsea off of her lovely book, Artistry Inside Ballet Technique, which if you're watching on YouTube, I will hold up so you can see what it looks like. And I'll put the link to that you can purchase on Amazon. So that will be in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for being here, Chelsea. It's always so fun to chat with you. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to share it with a friend or leave a quick review. It really helps more adult dancers find the podcast. All the links and resources we mentioned today are waiting for you in the show notes. And if you want more adult ballet content in between episodes, come hang out with me on Instagram @thebusybunhead. See you next week after class.